This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. We'd be remiss here on this hot take if on the day of Donald Trump's surrender, arrest, and arraignment for the new indictment by Jack Smith in Washington, D.C., related to all things Jan 6, the interference with the election process, the counting of the electoral votes, and the peaceful transfer of power, if we didn't talk about the fact that Jack Smith's work and that of his team is not done. He did not just put himself out of business by bringing what amounts to his third indictment of Donald Trump, 2 Mar-a-Lago indictments, 1 here in the District of Columbia, right? This group is not going anywhere. As he said at his press conference, Jack Smith said, the work continues, ongoing investigations. And you'll see, just as in Mar-a-Lago, they'll ask the judge, Tanya Chutkan, they'll ask her to continue to seal aspects of the indictment and other supporting documents and enter a protective order about the Brady material, the discovery material that the government is prepared to give to the defense, but continue to protect names and places of potential future indicted people. That indicates to me and to others one of several things. One, the co-conspirators, of which there are 6 in the indictment, and they've all been identified. We start with Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Jeff Clark, Sidney Powell, Ken Cheeseborough, right? Attorneys all. And then lastly, another attorney, but listed as a political operative, Boris Epshteyn. If they don't soon cut a deal to cooperate with the federal government, Department of Justice, and tell the truth, they're going to be indicted as well in separate indictments, we imagine, not in the same indictment as Donald Trump, because that lets a Donald Trump's, right, the train-carrying Donald Trump's indictment all the way to conviction, right, is just going to tug him, just going to bring him to justice. The other indictments will address the other people in their own time, in their own way, on different trial docket schedules and timelines. This way, Donald Trump gets brought to justice before the election, and the others, of course, will be brought to justice, but they're less important than getting the American people to understand that they're voting for a convicted felon, if that's the case, by the time the election rolls around. How do we know that Jack Smith is continuing his investigation, even though he's brought this new indictment? He said so in his press conference. He will ask Tanya Chutkan, the judge, Judge Chutkan today, in the next several days for a protective order to protect the identity of cooperating witnesses and those that are not cooperating and could be indicted in the future. Uncharged individuals is the magic term for prosecutors in an ongoing investigation. When you see those magic words, ongoing investigation, uncharged individuals, that means Jack Smith's not done. And so for those that are thinking, well, I appreciated the indictment, it's very efficient, it's very elegant, it's very surgical, but it left out a lot of stuff. And it left out a lot of people in terms of being on the other side of the V, United States versus someone. And that was intentional, not by accident. But don't think he's left them out of the narrative, of the history, of the justice process. He hasn't. He'll just do it in his own time against these other people while the Trump train moves itself out of the station through indictment to move towards conviction, trial and conviction. That's where we're at. And so who would be the other people? Well, first of all, to corroborate what I'm saying here on the hot take, there are more witnesses scheduled for mid-August who will continue to testify to the grand jury. Now, under Department of Justice guidelines and the law, you can use a grand jury for many, many things if you're the Department of Justice, but you can't use it to keep going back to the jury, the grand jury, to add like more evidence to support the allegations or the claims or the criminal conspiracies that you already have. So let's use this new indictment as a for example. This new indictment has 3 conspiracies, all led by Donald Trump, right? 1 defendant, 6 co-defendants, and that's the focus. But that doesn't mean, as part of the 3 conspiracies, of which there were 5 defined steps that are listed in the indictment, mostly involving Rudy Giuliani, fake electors, the pressure campaign on Mike Pence, and then not causing the Jan 6 insurrection, but using it as a weapon to continue to cling to power. Those are the steps of the three different conspiracies leading to three different criminal counts that are in the indictment. So you can't go back, if you're Jack Smith's team, to the grand jury to kind of add on evidence for what's already been framed by the indictment. That's not the grounds for a superseding indictment. You can, however, continue to follow new or different investigative threads and see where those facts lead you. That's where the new witnesses come in. And that's where two things I predict will likely happen in the very near future. One is another superseding indictment to bring new charges or new claims against Donald Trump once he gets, Jack Smith and his team, more cooperation from either the currently not cooperating, unindicted co-conspirators, but could be indicted co-conspirators, or from other witnesses. And so you have that, the superseding indictment against Donald Trump. Could add a defendant here and there, but likely just Donald Trump. Then you have the individual indictments that won't be consolidated, won't be put together, won't be tried even by the same judge. They'll be assigned to different judges. And we could have 6, 8, or 12 or more future indictments. Even people that weren't listed even as co-conspirators in Donald Trump's indictment are not out of the woods. I'm talking to Jenna Ellis, right? Yeah, you're not listed in the indictment. Doesn't mean you're out of the woods. The people listed have a very difficult decision to make. They're on the horns of a dilemma. The sword of Damocles is hanging over their head. They either cooperate or they're going to get indicted. In their own individual indictments, everybody gets one, right? And people like, however, Jenna Ellis and the fake electors and people in the GOP leadership and maybe Representative Scott Perry, and the list goes on, could easily, along with the other henchmen, be indicted in future indictments brought through a grand jury sitting in the District of Columbia. And so that is a proper purpose for the grand jury, and that's what we expect Jack Smith to do, both get a superseding indictment against Donald Trump, not to support the existing conspiracies, but to add new charges based on new evidence that's been developed since the grand jury indicted Donald Trump. And we have a perfect template or blueprint for this in Mar-a-Lago. What happened in Mar-a-Lago? Why did a superseding indictment come a month and a half after the original indictment? So soon, Jack? Because originally he felt ready, no indictment before it's time, but when it's time, it's time. Jack Smith went in and got his indictment in June. He also sent a target letter to some people, including the IT worker in Mar-a-Lago, Yuscil Taveras, and basically said, we think you're involved in a criminal conspiracy with Carlos de Oliveira and Walt Nauta. And we have you on videotape, basically, showing that you were looking for the server to delete it, and that's what we think you did. That's your target letter. And that happened after the indictment. So the pressure of the indictment and the target letter on Yuscil Taveras made him switch lawyers, fire the Trump-appointed and paid-for lawyer Stan Woodward, who he shared with Walt Nauta, and get his own independent lawyer. And lo and behold, within a day, I think on July 5th, how appropriate, Mr. Yuscil Taveras wanted his own day of liberty. And so he reached back to the federal government and said, I got something to tell you. And he said, I was involved with a conspiracy involving the maintenance worker and the body guy, the butler, and me. Sounds like a terrible game of Clue, a treasonous game of Clue at Mar-a-Lago. And the government said, well, I'm glad you told us that because we already knew that. We have you on video. We have recordings. We pieced it together with text messages. So welcome, come in. We won't indict you, but you need to cooperate right now. With that new information that was developed at the beginning and middle of July, Jack Smith was able to go back to the grand jury in Miami because we had gotten reporting. We'd gotten some chatter that the grand jury in Miami had reconvened. And maybe was hearing new evidence. That was the new evidence. And then came at the end of July, on the 27th of July, the superseding indictment where we knew when we saw it that Yuscil Taveras had flipped, and that was the new evidence. That is an appropriate way to do a superseding indictment. And Jack Smith anticipated that could happen, knowing what he had, fired out in terms of target letters and pressure on co-conspirators when he told Judge Cannon in their protective order motion, we need to seal every aspects of this to protect future other individuals that we're investigating and witnesses that are cooperating with us and that information, because we have an ongoing investigation with uncharged individuals. And so you put those pieces of the puzzle together and you look down and you got a superseding indictment. And that's what happened there. And that is what likely is to happen next. So for those that are wondering, is that it? Is that all? What have you done for me lately, Jack Smith? Yeah, 3 indictments in 9 months. I want more. Well, you're going to get more. You're going to get a superseding indictment against Donald Trump as soon as more witnesses come in and continue to testify before Jack Smith. But he didn't want to wait any longer because he did not want to derail the speedy trial and getting this set in 2024 before the election. And that's what we're going to start hearing today about Tanya Chutkan, federal judge Chutkan's thought process when she tells the lawyers in her room, A, I'm in charge, and B, let's talk about soon a trial date that I'll be setting in this case. She'll do it in a quite different way than Judge Cannon. She is the more experienced, more sober, more talented judge, as between the two that have a defendant named a federal judge who have a defendant named Donald Trump in front of them. And we'll watch what happens there, but only in one place. Here on MeidasTouch YouTube channel. Follow me here on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. I do hot takes just like this one. We pull it all together on a podcast at the intersection of law and politics. It's the top podcast in that world, U.S. law and politics, called Legal AF, only on the MeidasTouch network. On its YouTube channel, free subscribe. Go over to audio, grab us on audio. We do it every Wednesday and Saturday. You can find all my work, all my hot takes, in a playlist on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. Go over playlist, find Michael Popok, and there I am. And if you want to continue to communicate with me, do it through social media. I'm everywhere, including on Threads at MS Popok. Until the next hot take, this is Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.